All right, episode 8 for Shaman Talk with Tegan. Today we're going to get into a little bit heavier topic. We're going to talk about death rites. So this is just one of those things that as a shaman I can go in and do for somebody. I'll be honest, this is one of the few things that I have not personally dealt with yet as a shaman. For those of you who are maybe just coming in and seeing this, or who have only watched one or two of my videos, I just completed all my rites and been given all my rites last October of 2022. So most of the stuff that I make videos on, I've done either in training or as a working shaman. This just happens to be one of those few things that I have not actually done, but I have heard other stories from fellow shaman. I've done the, training in which we learn how to do all this stuff. So I'm not speaking necessarily from firsthand experience yet, but again, this is one of those things that I can do and I'm available to do. If as I go through this, you're like, oh, that's something I might need or someone I know might need. Okay, so death rites. What I can do as a shaman is I go in for someone who is dying. So usually, if someone's in hospice or has been in the hospital a long time, and maybe not all of us have, experience with this, but a lot of us maybe, of someone who they just couldn't let go for they took a while to get to the death process. They were just in the act of dying for a long time. And it's very sad, obviously, but if you call in someone like me, I can help basically speed up the process. So to some of you, that might sound horrible and you might question why you would want to speed up someone's death process. And if you do think that way, I encourage you to look at it like this person is on their way out anyways. So I may as well come in and make it stop their suffering, basically, because no one wants to be stuck in that dying state. That's pretty terrible. So there are 3 main parts to giving someone their death rites. And, giving someone these death rites, it's possible it can be done within a couple hours and then the person moves on and they die. But from what I've heard from other people and other, authors and things on this subject, sometimes it takes days or weeks because there's reasons it's just not progressing. So I'd have to keep coming back. And, obviously to me, I don't fear death. I see death as just another part of life, but I can imagine that would still get pretty heavy with everyone's grieving and sadness and things all around. But I also don't fear that situation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So first step in giving someone their death rites is called recapitulation, which is basically just a drawn out word for helping facilitate the act of forgiveness if necessary. So the family can call me in, or if the person who is actively dying is still well enough, they can be the ones to ask for someone like me. So what happens in the recapitulation stage is I come in and I basically help the family to say their goodbyes, and a big part here is that if there's any kind of grudges or grievances that are still actively going on between you and that person, that's the time to forgive and let go, because that person might still be clinging and holding on to life because of that. So if it's, your great uncle dying and he stole money from you, but you're there, even though you don't get along, that's the time that I try and help people be like, okay, let's forgive each other. Let's let this person leave in peace. And that can be hard for people because some people are going to, I've unfortunately literally heard this the other day. Someone was on the phone and they were saying, when this person dies, don't let me talk at their funeral because it's going to be all terrible things. And it was just like, oh, I felt so bad for both parties in that situation. But, like I've said in other videos, we can't hold on to these grudges. It's not only not fair to the other person, but not fair to you to hold on to something like that, especially after the person has died. It's just so unnecessary. So as a shaman, part of my job is to try and help people forgive, and so that they can make their way through this death process quicker. And sometimes it's just needing to say, I love you. You know, if someone is emotionally unavailable when they were alive, maybe that's all that needs to be said, but it literally verbally needs to be said, and I can help hopefully help to facilitate that happening. So even, forgiving people, moving on from grudges, things like that. So what can happen too is that, like I said, they might be holding on to that, and that's why they're not letting go. Or maybe, again, we haven't all witnessed this, but if someone's in a deep, deep state of grief, they might say something to that person like, please don't go, don't leave me. And those are binding words. And again, this is never to shame anybody who's been in that deep state of grief, or maybe who is actively, but give a second to the thought that that person, even if they're incapacitated, even if they're not consciously there, they can hear you and they're going to try and stay, which is not fair to them, because when it's someone's time to go, it's someone's time to go. So if I hear that as the shaman, I'm going to come in and try and get them to instead say something along the lines of, I love you, thank you for everything, go in peace, or, things, whatever the situation kind of calls for. But we got to make sure that we don't try and cling to them, whether it's physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, because that can keep someone here and just drags everything out. And we don't want that, right? As much as a lot of us, whether we understand it or not, probably fear death. Death is nothing to fear. It's just the next phase of life, really. And so, although it might be the end of them being here with you physically, as you've probably all heard or felt before, that people are still with you, right? They're just on a different plane of existence, and you can talk to them when you want to. They'll hear you. So again, like I say in all my videos, this is a very quick, flippant way to say some of this heavy stuff, but this is just coming from my perspective and doing it in a fairly fast way. Okay, so we're going to go down the 3 things and go in a little bit more detail. So that was recapitulation. That was 1. So getting everybody to say their goodbyes, let go of grudges, forgive, forget, or just saying, I love you, or all is forgiven. Please, it's okay to go. It's okay to let go. So after that phase, which again, that could take, depending on what's going on, take a couple minutes. It could take hours, days, weeks. So after that is finished, what I do is I go in and give the person who is dying an illumination. In all these stages, the recapitulation, illumination, the 3rd step I'll talk about in a second, these can also be done if the person is unconscious, because I can still get to them, so to speak, even if they're not there, because they're still there. They're just not conscious, right? Their energy is still there, their soul's still there. I'll still be able to connect with them. So step 2 is an illumination, and I've done a video on illumination before, mentioned it in other videos. It's me going and clearing out their chakras, especially if there was a lot to forgive on their side or the other people's side, the other family members' side. Then I go in and clear out all that stuff. Because like I said, even if they're unconscious, that's still bubbling stuff up into their energy field. So then I get rid of it like I would normally do for anyone, whether in person or not. But I go in, clear their energy field. And again, if there was a lot to forgive or whatever it was, that might take a long time. I might have to come back and do it again because there's so much stuff happening, but that's a good sign that they're finally releasing these things, these negative energies, these deep-rooted negative emotions, right? So I go and clear that out like I normally would do. If you're curious more about the illumination, go back and watch my video, but that's what I do next. Then after I feel like their energy is fully cleared, that's when we get into the 3rd stage, which the 3rd stage is the only stage I actually have experience in, because we did have to do this during training. And it's called the death spiral. So what happens is I take my rattle, which I don't have with me right now, but I take my rattle, and effectively what I do, I start to undo the chakras. So when I do the illumination, I always undo people's chakras to clear it out, but then I close it back up. What I do with the person who is actively dying is I open up their chakras in a very, very specific way. And I'm basically starting to untether their energy and their soul from their body. Because the whole reason I'm there, right, is because for whatever reason they're having trouble leaving. And so in doing that, it's just another step to get them to pass on fully. I'm literally going around their chakras with my rattle, like I said, in a very specific pattern. It's actually kind of confusing, but once you do it, it's like, oh, all right, it's in your brain. But untethering them from their physical body, because it's just that extra little push they might need to go to, the other side, or so to speak. And again, that part of the process might take a long time, because even if we go through the recapitulation and people forgive, they forgive, whatever it is, they might start to feel free and then get slammed with guilt about something that's like, boom, back in the body, got to revisit everything. But generally, if it works, after I untether the body, I'll call in their spirit guides, I'll call in their ancestors, I'll call in whoever I feel they need to help them move on. And you've heard stories, I'm sure, of people all of a sudden being like, oh, looking in the corner of the room, like, my sister's here who died 20 years ago. When you hear someone say something like that, they're not hallucinating. They're seeing their sister, or whoever it is. They're seeing their mother who passed, because these people know that it's time for them to go, and they're trying to help bring them back into the light. So I guess that's also just a little thing to put out there. If someone's in that state and they claim to see things, they're not making it up. They're seeing those people. They're seeing those things. And it's ultimately good, as long as it's not like, I'm seeing something horrible. And that's a whole other thing. But their angels come in, their guides, their ancestors, people they recognize, to help bring them to that state. So, like I said, the death spiral was something that we actually practiced in shamanic training. And basically what we did is that even though none of us were dying, we had to lay down and we had our soul, our energy untethered from our body. And that's basically as close as you can get to death without actually dying. And sounds scary maybe, but it was a trip. It was very freeing, really, because you're just your soul there for a few minutes only, and you're just floating in this freeness. And it coming from a shamanic perspective, it was like, whoa. What was crazy was when your soul enters back into your body and you're like, oh, I'm heavy and like a human now, and I have like this weird meat suit. And it was a change of perspective too, because you hear it all the time, right? Like, you're a light being, you're a soul, and that's all you are. But until I, at least, really felt that freeness, it was like, whoa, that's legitimate. You know what I mean? Like, I am a soul. I'm a free floating thing, so to speak. And it wasn't until I came back into my body that I was like, oh, like, this is temporary. I'm grateful for this and what it has helped me do and achieve, but like, this isn't who I am. And that's really the root of it, right? Like, we aren't our physical bodies. They allow us to do a lot of things, but in the end, it's about your energy and who you are at a soul level. And I really think that, death and birth are one and the same. And I know that might sound weird. And again, in society, especially in the Western society, there's like this deep-rooted fear of our own mortality that we have to try and overcome. That's like the ultimate test, being able to not fear death. And just like in all the other videos I make, of course, that's not going to happen overnight. Or it might, I don't know. You let me know if overnight you don't fear death, because that's amazing. But yeah, we're all just souls, and we're just trying to make our way back to where we came from after we die. So again, I know this is a heavier subject, and I'm not trying to glaze over the emotions and the grieving that happens when someone passes, because of course, that's going to take a while no matter who you are. Even me as a shaman, I know the next time someone close to me passes over, well, first of all, I'm probably going to be like helping them. But at the same time, they're not going to be physically here with me anymore. And that is sad. And that's okay to feel that way and go through what you need to. But ultimately, it's not something that needs to be feared. from you, from them, whoever. And I think, again, it's just that next step that's like kind of freeing as a person to be like, oh, like I don't need to fear dying. There's no reason. Of course, there are some traumatic stories of death, but the act of dying and going is not that scary. It's just the next phase. We're all energy, we're all light, and we just go back to oneness. And for a lot of us, we end up coming back, right? We have to reincarnate, do it again. And really, you've most likely died many, many times. So it's really nothing new for a lot of you. So if you keep that in mind, it's not as scary. And some of you are probably like, I'm not keeping any of this in mind. I don't want to think about death at all, ever. And that's okay. Sure. Just keep going. It's fine. It's not something you have to dwell on. But, it's there. Everyone dies and it happens. So if you know someone who is stuck in that death state and just can't seem to let go, that's when you call on me or call on another shaman or someone who has similar abilities, and we're going to help bring them to that state. And, it's natural. I know that some of you might think like that's horrible, you're leading people to their deaths, but that's not what it is. It's helping them, because in the end, being stuck in that state is not fun for anyone. Those people, essentially what's happening is they're coming and going, and that's exhausting. That's exhausting for that person. They deserve peace. And we all have different beliefs, of course, and that's fine, but from my perspective, we all deserve peace, and there's no judgment where you go. There's no judging if you go to heaven or hell. It's just everyone goes back to the same place, go back to the light, and you're back to oneness. And like I said, then sometimes you got to come back because you didn't learn your lesson, but death is nothing to fear. No one's judging you. There's no going to hell. It's just one place. What I am going to say, though, that I mentioned in my spirit attachment video, and that's why you call in a person like me to make sure they get to the light, right? What can happen is that kind of purgatory area, which is the fourth dimension where ghosts linger. You don't want to leave a person, especially if you know they've had a lot of grudges or that your family has had a lot of grudges and drama. They might get stuck. They might die before I can get there or before you even think about contacting someone like me. And then guess what? They might be stuck lingering in that fourth dimension. They're not back to oneness. They're not back to the light. They're earthbound, And again, that's just a whole nother form of suffering, basically. Oftentimes people don't know they've died, or they do know they died and they're pissed and they're going to take it out on people, especially people they know in this lifetime, right? You don't want a spirit attachment. You don't want grandpa, whoever, sticking around trying to, get their business done that they didn't get done in this lifetime. They don't want to. They want to continue the drama, whatever it is. That's a whole other thing. If you want to learn more about that, go back to my other video. But overall, what I'm saying is, as the shaman, I come in, make sure they get back to where they need to be. Okay, death, although very sad, and it's okay to feel sad and grieve and go through the whole process. It might take a long time, but what I'm here to do is help those souls make sure they get back to the right place, because they deserve peace no matter who they were, what they did. Everyone deserves to go back to the light, find peace, and just, heal. You can heal back up there or out there, whatever you want to call it. Okay. I'll end it right there because I'm going to start trailing off into a whole nother topic. As usual, I'm coming from a place from my perspective. So if you're listening and you're like, what do you mean there's no hell? What's wrong with you? Again, let me know. I don't care. We can have a discussion about it. This is all just to put it out there. Some of you, even if you're, more religious, that's okay. Thank you for listening anyway. But doesn't that bring you a little bit of peace, knowing that that's possible, that hell doesn't actually exist? If not, that's okay too. Let me know. Like I said, I'm an open book, and I'm open for, even if you disagree with me, I'd love to have a discussion. And yeah, anyways, thank you for coming. Contact me at any point. You can leave a comment. You can email me at tarotwithtegan@gmail.com if you feel like it. Or on the other side, if you're like, yes, these videos are great and interesting. What's your opinion on unicorns? I'll give it, because I do have a slight opinion on unicorns. So let me know if there's a subject that you think would be interesting. I'll have an opinion probably on most subjects, maybe not all, but you know, I'm open to it. Let's see where this goes.